under our first module, again, which is called creating a high performance, which is what you do first in corporate, right? You build your team, right? I don't know how many of y'all have been at this level or not, but if you have, feel free to speak up because I'll share my experiences so this will make sense. But I also need you to share your experiences if you've been down this route before, running a project. Within creating a high-performing team with the course content, the first thing you do is build your team. That makes sense, right? It didn't used to say that with the old exam. The next thing you want to do is define team rules, because once you get a group of people together, you need some rules in place. If you're autocratic and working by yourself, that's easy. But just because you think you're cool, everybody else doesn't. So there has to be team ground rules amongst 15, 20 people. Then you want to negotiate project agreements. Well, what type of agreements? We'll get to that in a second. You as a servant leader and as a transformational leader that's over that project, you want to empower your team and the stakeholders along with it. We'll talk about the distinction between those. And there's not, well, then you want to train your team members and your stakeholders, you meaning you, the project manager. Then you want to engage and support virtual teams, which we've already doing now because of COVID, right? And then your job is to also build a shared understanding about whatever project that you're governing or being a servant leader to, right? So this is our module, and these are the topics under that module. There's 7 of them. Okay, we left off at negotiate project agreements. And initially, again, we built, this still is in contact with building a team or a high performance team. Right, so we've got our team charter in place. We got our team ground rules in place. And now it's time for the team itself to negotiate project agreements. And that's going to reach outside the team just a little bit. Right, so there are agreements from a PMI standard standpoint that need to, if you're doing it the right way. Right, so again, when we're taking the exam, we're doing it their way. Okay, so everything that we cover is definitely going to apply to the exam. Okay. So some of our tools and deliverables or outcomes that come out of negotiating project agreements is SLAs. I'm pretty sure most of us are familiar with service level agreements, actual team performance reports, and as well as project performance reports, resource calendars. In other words, we'll talk about that a little bit, but days, nights, hours that we're going to work, that has to be agreed upon. Go live dates or go live blackouts, that's normally going to be dictated by the organization itself. I remember when I was at Cox Enterprises, anytime we wanted to go live or blackout, we had to actually abide by, it wasn't even the PMO office, it was just a organizational standard. We do all this with negotiation skills, which we've been talking about. This just not applies to project managers, but also your team, right? Expert judgment, we understand what that is. Now you'll keep seeing that term over and over again. That's just pretty much subject matter experts. A new term that's in the lesson content or the course content. Pretty sure anybody have not heard, lessons learned is you can do that periodically through a project. You normally, in traditional projects, it used to be you do them at the end. PMI finally figured out that people are doing that, and it needs to be done periodically during the project, maybe every phase of every project. But that's where you document what went wrong and what can we do better. Right? That's one of the things that the hybrid or the adaptive frameworks like Agile, Scrum, Kanban, they do that pretty much on an iteration basis. It's constantly done, lessons learned, but they call it something else, retrospectives. So these are the tools, techniques, or tools and deliverables or outcomes, as I like to call them, that will come out of negotiating project agreements. So let's look at what type of agreements are they talking about when it comes to projects. Project agreements along with our project objectives, which we're shooting at, right? This is how we're going to able to monitor the work in a project that needs to be agreed upon. Normally, how we monitor work in a project is normally dictated by the organization. I understand where they're coming from here. But in terms of on a day-to-day basis, we'll cover that in a little bit. So in traditional projects, as it says, we identify each deliverable or outcome, right? But that's normally dictated through the acceptance criteria from the end user standpoint, right? So yeah, the team may have some say-so in it, but working with the end users, they're pretty much going to define, okay, what makes a bottle, what makes a pencil, right? On the agile side, well, you'll keep hearing me say adaptive side. And when I say adaptive, I always mean the agile frameworks like Scrum, Kanban, Lean, DSDM, FDD, which is feature-driven development. We'll get into some of that later, but Scrum, Kanban, and Lean, you probably heard of, definitely. Right. Well, again, because most of those frameworks are iterative, meaning just they go around in a circle until they keep building and building. Well, what they do, they've incorporated what they call feedback or retrospectives, or pretty much feedback from the customer standpoint. I think we have a epic super user on the call. Was that Lydia? Who was that? Was it Brandy?
No, it wasn't me.
I think it was Brandy. Yeah, epic super users. Anyway, we can get into that a little later too. But other agreements, if you look at the bottom of this screen here, the definition of done, that's used in traditional project management as well, but it's normally used in the adaptive frameworks, like again, Scrum and Agile, Kanban, right? So these have to be agreed upon with the team and most of the time the end user, especially in terms of Agile and Scrum. Other types of agreements, and again, agreements aren't made to be murky. They are made to keep order. When there's a disagreement, go back to the agreement, right? Other types of agreements that has to be mutually agreed upon moving forward within projects are actual contracts, right? This is normally used for external and external customers. And sometimes we're the external customer. MOUs or memorandums of understanding, service level agreements or SLAs, letters of agreement, right? These have to be negotiated through and agreed upon. Most of these, not most, but some are done at the beginning of a project, especially when it comes to teaming agreements. Strategies around negotiation. We've kind of covered that already. From a adaptive standpoint, and we're going to do a really high level with Agile and Scrum, probably midway through this content today to get you up to speed, because tomorrow moving forward, you're going to need to know a little bit. Now, one thing I did mean to interject, everyone has the PMBOK, that loaned out version I gave you. Well, there's also that PMBOK is split into two pieces. You got the PMBOK, which is the project management body of knowledge. This is important. And then there's another book attached to that. I think it's at the beginning or the end. It's called Agile Practice Guide. So a lot of the questions going to be geared around the adaptive systems, which is very easy to comprehend, right? By the way, meaning Scrum, Agile. So are we talking about just the framework of it? Well, you're going to have to read that practice guide. You already have it. I can send a separate copy, but it's already embedded as a separate book in the PMBOK. I can't remember if it's the beginning or the end, but it's called Agile Practice Guide. Make a note of that. That one you want to read. It's an easy read. I think it's maybe 60 pages at best. And it'll give you an extremely good idea of Agile, in addition to sort of the high level that I'm going to give you, which is not in this course content. Okay, so make sure you make a note of that. Read the Agile Practice Guide, because the framework itself, and again, Agile, if you know anything about it or even heard about it, it's a mindset, and they really mean that. It really is a mindset. Traditional project, the stuff we're going over now, it can get a little bit process oriented and kind of technical. The Agile mindset, meaning around Scrum and all, it's not that difficult. Right now, it's difficult to perform every day because it calls for daily activities that every single day there's a 15-minute meeting, and they mean that. And as an Agile, I'm Agile certified as well, and I've had Agile projects in the past. If you really don't carry out those little daily 15-minute meetings, you're going to be in trouble. So that mindset and those what they call the Agile Manifesto, that stuff is set up in place for a reason. So anyway, that's going to be covered, but you have a written material, meaning called the Agile Practice Book, embedded in the PMBOK that I gave you. right? So you have reading material. Read that book. Easy read, puts everything in perspective in terms of agile frameworks. Okay. I meant to tell you that this morning. When it comes to traditional, the importance objective clearly designates the project's intended deliverables. Traditional is different. Again, now you have to go back to acceptance criteria from the customer. So these are things that are negotiated up front or beginning to negotiate up front. Continue with negotiations. You got particular documents that some of that stuff we covered, but these are some of the negotiating documents and or criteria that comes along with the project. I'm not going to read all these to you. Some of the stuff you've probably seen before if you've worked on projects, and especially if you've led them.
Kevin?
Sure.
Sorry to disturb. So when you're talking about the agile, is that just more or less just things that maybe get brought up or change or something that you just have to work around? I'm just trying to get the idea of.
Yeah, what I'm going to do, and you probably pushed me where I need to be right after lunch, meaning I need to cover that. So I'm going to cover that right after.
I'm sorry. I thought maybe I was the only one that had no idea.
No, I guarantee you not. And I probably need to, you're right. I need to cover it now because things are popping up now that I'm going to be referring back to. But, well, you're all right. The agile mindset is constant change and acceptance of that change. In traditional project management, just to cover your topic that you're talking about now, in traditional project management, you don't resist change, but that's the purpose of doing all that planning up front. We don't want you. If we say you're going to get a car, you're going to get a car. There's not going to be any wings on that car. In the adaptive framework, the customer can make a change at the last minute. That's the mindset, right? Now, it might not be a car, but most of this in software development, what they're talking about with agile framework, right? So change is accepted and expected in the adaptive frameworks like Agile, Scrum, Kanban, whereas traditional, which is what you're looking at now, the stuff we're covering now, you have to go through a change control system, change requests. We don't want change. Whereas the other side of the house expects and welcomes change. That's the mindset. So we're going to cover some of it anyway, to get you in the right frame of mind. So when we're talking about this stuff, there's two sides of this fence. So you need to understand the other side as well. Gotcha. Thanks for bringing it up. Thanks for bringing it up.
Yep.
This next prioritization techniques. This is another one. This is on the adaptive side mostly. When we're talking about negotiation, in traditional project management, you're negotiating for the most part all your teaming agreements, agreements with your outside suppliers and customers, and whether you're end user, from an agile standpoint. I think one of our got a super epic super user here, but the product owner owns everything on the adaptive side. The way they prioritize is the stuff you're looking at on that screen. They use a model called the Kano model, which these are features that excite the customer, that are base performance. This is how they prioritize what they're going to work on. Another model that they use on the adaptive side is called Moscow. Well, you can actually use it on traditional too, but it's normally on the adaptive side, meaning Kanban, Scrum, Agile, called Moscow. Some of you may have heard of that. This is where you rank order features and functions of whatever it is you're building. Moscow stands for, okay, the user base might say, okay, feature number 1. Oh, this is a must-have. That's what the M is for. And then feature number 3. Oh, that's a should have. That's what the S is for. And this is sort of ranked order. And feature number 19, that's a could have. We don't really need it, but we could have it. That's what the CO is for. And then the W is a would like to have. In other words, the whole thing will function without it, but we like to have it, right? The door of a car. Yeah, you don't need automatic locks, but yeah, that's something you like to have. Well, we do now in this day and age. But that's a would like to have, right? Then you have what they call compared analysis or paired comparison analysis, which is simply looking at a pair of whatever, A versus B. Do I want the Ferrari or do I want the Volkswagen, right? Then we have the 100-point method, which is kind of self-explanatory on a scale of 1 to 100. Would this be a necessary feature or not? So these are prioritization techniques to determine features and functions and objectives, normally on the adaptive side. So this stuff will be covered as well. And when you read your Agile practice guide that's embedded in your PMBOK, you'll see all this stuff. Well, most of it anyway. It's not going to get that deep because it's not trying to take you through an Agile course, but it's giving you enough information, well, more than enough information to pass the exam. Okay. Other agreements that's on the traditional side, that's kind of will be dictated not 100% by the project team, but performance reports. Normally your sponsors and middle management, they would kind of dictate, okay, these are the kind of metrics that we want you guys to cover. These are the kind of metrics that we want you guys to report on. Why? Because they're going to be receiving those reports so that they can do what? Make functional decisions or guaranteed, well, not guaranteed decisions, but functional decisions. So they're going to kind of dictate what goes in those performance reports and what you're going to be covering. It's not totally up to the project team, right? That's going to be, again, negotiated. Things like I said, it's percentage of work complete, the quality and technical performance metrics, start and finish dates, right? Change requests, how we're going to handle that. Any defects, what happens with defects? Okay? And again, all this is done through expert judgment or our subject matter experts. Again, this is a key tool and technique, and these are people. It's not tools and techniques. They're actual people. This is your project team, right? Whatever you're building, they're going to be an expert number of people, whether they cover, it doesn't matter, database, well, in my case, I always think of IT, programmers or whatever. These are the subject matter experts. These are the people that's going to help you along the way consistently. Again, we've been talking about this forever, so we don't have to keep bringing it up. We know what subject matter experts are, right? And in short order, that's SMEs. You'll hear me say the term SMEs, subject matter experts. I'm pretty sure you've used it before. Other negotiable documents or agreements. Now, this is pretty much team oriented, but at the same time, it's still going to be dictated by your organization, right? Identify the working days of the project, not of the company. The shifts of the project, of the company, but the company will have some, not say so, but depending on the culture, it'll kind of dictate, and the culture of the project too. When specific resources are made available, right? So this stuff has to be negotiated. You're normally hitting this up, right? Especially if you run projects before, you know how this works. All right, we just talked about resource calendars, right? Days of the week work, shifts we work. Like I said, I'm normally 1 or 2 slides ahead. Team performance reviews. Hold on 1 second. Team performance reviews. And also identify lessons learned regularly. Again, on the traditional side of the house, meaning waterfall, normal autocratic project management, we do lessons learned at the end. We used to at the end. Lessons learned, again, is just review of the project. What did we do right? What could be done better? Well, the reason why lessons learned are so important is not reinventing the wheel. There's a term that we're going to be coming up called enterprise environmental factors and company process assets, organizational process assets. Well, when you look in your knowledge bases or your historical databases, normally there's a project similar to the one you're working on. Well, somebody in there will have documented lessons learned. That's where we, the project managers, go back and look at lessons. Well, what did they screw up at last time? So we won't make the same mistakes this time. That's the purpose of documenting lessons learned on the traditional side. On the adaptive side, meaning Agile, Scrum, Lean, and all those frameworks, that's done on a regular basis. And we'll see how in a second here when I start covering those frameworks. We're going to take 15 minutes to do that. Right. This is the actual definition of a lessons learned register. Anybody online, anybody participate in lessons learned before? A session, a lessons learned session?
I know whenever we were doing our Lean Six Sigma green belt, we did like a plus delta thing at the end. So what was
That's
good?
it.
Yeah, what we needed to improve on.
Same thing. I mean, every uh, framework or whatever you want to call it, standard, it's going to be called differently. Same thing. And I've heard that term before. Exact same thing. What's done, what we do right, what do we do wrong, how can we improve? Well, here's the official PMI definition for your exam right there. Okay. We've been talking about it quite a bit, so again, I'm not going to repeat a lot of it, but I did want to get to the second paragraph here where it talks about agile. Again, they have well, on the adaptive side, every time I say adaptive, again, agile, Scrum, Lean, Kanban, FDDD, all that. Theirs is called a retrospective, right? It's in bold because it's going to be on the exam. Adaptive or agile Scrum, when they do a lessons learned, it is called a retrospective. Under traditional or waterfall or predictive project management, which is what PMP is about, it's called lessons learned. Adaptive is called retrospective, except retrospectives are held at in the end of every sprint or at the end of every iteration, right? So it's constantly going. Every 2 to 4 weeks, they're doing a retrospective, what they did in that cycle and how can they improve for the next cycle or the next sprint or the next iteration, okay? We got special intervals that some companies have, some don't. They call blackout times. They're necessary during the production of work. Then we have go live times. I've had experience with the go live blackout times that never affected any of my projects. Go live times did. When I was at Cox Enterprise, again, they had a very outstanding PMO office, and the project I was leading was an identity management project, and it was specifically pertaining to the employees, how they access their what do you call it? Wasn't their company mailboxes? It was their money. It'll come to me in a minute. But anyway, it had to do with each employee's accounts. You know, that the ones that had a internal account, their banking system, right? So anyway, for us and our identity management project, we can only go live on Friday nights, meaning we all the work we did through the week. We couldn't touch anything. We couldn't go live in the daytime. We had to go because we had to take down certain production servers. There were no test servers, and we had to take down, I think, the payroll service, which they was not going to have us messing with, during the week. So that I'm familiar with. And Agile, I'm familiar with that as well. They use iterations, which we're going to see in a second, because we're going to look at the Agile and adaptive or Scrum processes and how they work. Anyway, there you have iterations and sprints, which goes in a cycle. There are blackout times associated with that, on the prospective project and the companies that you're doing that in, okay? But that will have to be negotiated. And as an Agile coach or a Scrum master, that's your job to lead the team and get things out of the way. In other words, obstacles.